Today on Months and Made This, I am making a full Italian meal inspired by one of my favorite books. In this book, and I'm going to leave you guessing on which book it is, there's a meal that takes place in Rome towards the end of the story. And in this meal, they have an antipasti platter, there is a first course of tortellini and cream sauce, and then the main course or second course is a pot roast. So I'm gonna be making all of those for you today, only veganized. So first thing I'm gonna start on is the roast. Instead of a beef roast, I'm gonna be making a portobello mushroom roast. So let's get started mixing the ingredients for that so that can get going while we prepare the rest of the stuff. So this pot roast is going to be 4 portobello mushroom caps, and they are going to be simmered for about an hour and a half in a wine-based braising liquid. The sauce for this dish also is textured by these vegetables that I'm cutting up right now. So I have a whole carrot that I'm just breaking up into smaller chunks, and I'm going to cut up this celery also into smaller chunks, and this half of an onion. And I'm going to be putting it into the food processor so that it gets smaller, but I wanted to break it up a little bit so that it cooks, or sorry, breaks up more evenly in the food processor. And the full recipe for this is of course going to be linked below, so you don't necessarily have to write this down as I'm going through it here. So half this onion, just roughly chopped. And it's going into the food processor. And I'm going to pulse it until it becomes quite a fine dice. And you want to scrape down the sides as well, just so that everything gets into the blades and becomes the same uniform size. So this is about the size that you want here, pretty finely chopped up. And as it cooks down, like I said, this is going to be a lot of the texture for the sauce. So I'm going to prepare my pan and I'll meet you over at the stove. The pan I'm using here is quite large, and I need it to be big enough to be able to fit 4 portobello mushrooms within this, and it's gonna be uncovered, so you don't necessarily need to worry about it having a lid. So to get this started out, I'm going to put some olive oil in the pan and turn it up to a medium heat. And then I'm going to add all of the vegetables that I just chopped up in the food processor in here. Now this next step is going to take probably about 15 or so minutes. The goal is to get all of these vegetables caramelized, broken down, and really reduced with a bit of fond on the bottom. That's the brown stuff that sticks to the pan. And that's going to be the base for a lot of the flavor of this dish. So this is not a step that you want to really rush through. In fact, I'm actually going to do it where I actually set the timer for 15 minutes to make sure that I let it go the full time. And while that cooks down, I'm going to be preparing my portobello mushrooms. The next thing I'm going to do is clean these portobello mushrooms. I have 4 of them, so this is probably good for 4 people. Now, mushrooms are great because they can cook for quite a long time and the texture isn't really affected. They maybe get a little bit firmer, but overall they pretty much keep their texture. So what I'm doing here to prepare these is just using a spoon to scrape out the gills. The gills, they don't necessarily do anything bad. They don't have any off flavor or anything, but it's just a little bit of a cleaner presentation as well. They can have a tendency to kind of make the sauce a bit too dark. So I'm just cleaning out the gills of these 4 mushrooms with a spoon over the sink. For this too, I'm going to be leaving the stems pretty much intact. I'm just going to trim the edges a bit. The dirty end, I'll be cutting that off, but otherwise I'm going to be keeping the stems intact also. So clean the mushroom out, just give it a light rinse, make sure there's no dirt. Because it's going to be simmering for so long in liquid, you don't really have to worry about it absorbing the water, so it's okay here to just submerge them. I've cleaned my mushrooms and they're setting aside, ready to go. This is drying out nicely. It's cooking up well, but as you can see, there's no real brown yet. And so we're gonna have to let it keep going. As we continue to build the flavor of this pot roast, we have the onions and carrots and celery that are going to brown up and caramelize and really add a lot of nice flavor. Another flavor component is going to be wine. Now I've got this one, it's called our Daily Red. It's just a basic red wine. The reason I chose it though is because it is certified vegan. I sat through Whole Foods and used the Barnivore app and searched a bunch of Italian wines. A lot of them didn't come up. So I settled on this one and this will be great for this dish. Just use a red wine that you are able to drink or that you like to drink, and we need a cup of this. So I'm gonna just measure that out. All right, and the rest can be served alongside the meal. These are cloves. So in addition to the wine and the caramelized vegetables, one thing that makes this special is the addition of cloves. So we're going to add 12 whole cloves, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that's about 12. And we're going to use this to deglaze the pan as soon as those vegetables are caramelized. The mushrooms too are gonna add a lot of flavor, but it's through all of these different spices and everything going in there together, and the caramelization and the long time of simmering that's really gonna reduce everything together and just make an amazing pot roast with these mushrooms. So let me check on these vegetables. So these have been just hanging out by themselves. You can see the fond forming. They're sticking to the bottom of the pan. That's great. That's exactly what you want. That's the flavor. You don't really want it to burn, but you can kind of smell that it has this nice, just dark, spicy flavor already, or aroma already. So I'm gonna let these go just a few more minutes, let that fond further develop, let these further caramelize, and we'll be ready to throw everything in. All right, I switched out my little rubber spatula for this wooden one, and you can see there's a ton of fond on the bottom. My vegetables are quite brown, so at this time I'm going to add in my red wine, and it already has those cloves in there as well. And I'm just going to take about a minute or so and just scrape up all those bits off the bottom. Again, this is all of the flavor. And the texture that these vegetables still have is going to, like I said, carry through to the very end and be a lot of great texture for the sauce. Just scrape all those bits off. I also did add a bit of salt as well. You kind of want to salt a little bit along the way so that at the end you have a bunch of layers of salt built in. Of course, you want to taste it at the end before serving it to make sure that it has enough salt, but salting it along the way really helps as well. So the wine has gotten all of the fond off the bottom and it's reduced quite a bit. I'm going to be adding a can of tomatoes, and then I'm going to add a can amount of water. This is a 14-ounce can of tomatoes. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit before adding the water. The recipe that you will see online does call for a can of whole tomatoes that you break up. You can use a can of chopped tomatoes like I did here if you'd like. Just mix this around. Adding a bit of salt. Last couple seasonings I'm going to add are a bay leaf, and some red pepper flake. I'm gonna let this come up to a simmer, and then I'll add my mushrooms and we'll be ready to go. This has come up to a simmer. The house is already smelling amazing. I'm going to be adding some dried shiitake mushrooms. I'm gonna choose 8 caps. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What these are gonna do is they're actually gonna be really amazing at the very end. They're gonna have a ton of texture, a lot of flavor as well. They're gonna help build a lot of the flavor of the sauce as well. And so we're just gonna kind of bury those in here, or try to, they'll float for a minute. And the last thing we're going to do is add our Portobello mushroom caps. Oh, sorry, I forgot one important step. I forgot to cut the bottoms off. So I'm just gonna cut the dry bottoms off and put them directly into the pot. Just kind of allow them to nestle the other mushrooms below. And the last one. Now it's okay if they're a little bit tight at first. These are gonna shrink down, and this is pretty much what it's gonna look like while it simmers. So just keep an eye on them. I'm gonna actually finish them off with a bit of salt and pepper on top. But this is how you wanna let them go for the next hour and a half or so. So I'm gonna set my timer for an hour and a half. The thing that's going to determine whether they're done or not is how concentrated and reduced that sauce is. Once most of the liquid is pretty much gone, then you'll know that the sauce is ready. Like I said, but it's gonna be about an hour and a half. So turn it to low as it'll go. You wanna see just a couple of bubbles come up every once in a while. But other than that, it's gonna just hang out. In a traditional Italian meal, you start out with an antipasti, kind of a fresh or pickled vegetable type of platter, and then your actual first course is normally your pasta course. So we're gonna be starting on that next. The pasta course is gonna be a tortellini, a mushroom tortellini, and it's gonna be in a cream sauce. So the first thing we need to do for that is start out the cream sauce. And I'm gonna be using a basic cauliflower cream sauce base for that. Everything gets thrown in the Instant Pot. It's super easy, takes 4 minutes to cook, you blend it up, it's done. So let's throw things in the Instant Pot. For this sauce, we need 2 cups about of frozen cauliflower. It's gonna equal about a half of a head of cauliflower if you're using fresh. But I had frozen on hand, so that's what I decided to use. That looks about right. You're going to use a half cup of raw cashews, about a tablespoon of miso paste. You could use a bouillon if you'd like, but I'm using miso paste, trying to use more whole foods. I have 4 cloves of garlic, a tablespoon of nutritional yeast, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and some red pepper flake. To this, I'm gonna be adding 1 cup of water. You wanna give this a light stir. You could just do this on the stovetop if you do not have an Instant Pot. I would say it would take maybe about 10 minutes or so. You want the cauliflower to be nice and soft. So I'm gonna put the lid on this, set the Instant Pot for 4 minutes. As soon as it's done, unplug it, quick release, and then I can blend it up. While the sauce cooks and while my roast simmers behind me, I'm going to be preparing the tortellini. Now, it's impossible to find vegan tortellini in stores as far as I know, so I'm having to make my own, which is great because then I can control the ingredients that are in there. I'm going to be cheating a little bit, and instead of making my own homemade pasta, which you could, if you wanna go and look at my homemade pasta recipe, there's a great one in there, you could use that. But I'm gonna be using wonton wrappers, vegan ones of course, for my pasta dough. And then the filling I'm making, I actually prepared it ahead of time as I was testing this recipe. It's really easy, the recipe is linked below, but it's basically these dried shiitake mushrooms and cashews and some nutritional yeast and seasonings blended up together, and it gives you this really nice cheesy flavored mushroom filling. So this is already set up to go. I've cut off the corner of the bag to make it easy for me to put into each of the tortellini. So let's assemble. For these tortellini, you probably want about 10 per person. And as I said, I'm gonna be using wonton wrappers. The Dynasty brand I have found is vegan. So I'm going to lay out 10 of these wrappers to get myself all set up. And obviously, if you were making these for more people, you could create a larger assembly line process. But I have 10 here ready to go. I have some water, which is gonna help me stick things. And as I said, I have my filling already in this bag, ready to go. Any that I'm not using that are setting aside, I'm gonna cover with a damp towel so they don't dry out. All right, so for each of these, I'm going to be adding about a half teaspoon worth of filling, a half to 3/4 of a teaspoon of filling to each one. You don't want to overfill them because then they will seep out the sides and ruin the shape. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to show you how to fold them. So let's start with this one. Make sure the filling is in the middle. You want to add a bit of water around the outside and fold it over. The goal is to make sure that you get all of the air out and seal that filling in there completely. Now, if you wanted to, if you're doing it assembly line style, you can do it so that all of these, you get all of them to this stage and then move on to the next step. So the next step in folding it is to Basically fold the floppy end over onto the filling, add a little bit of water on your fingers and wet the edges, and then you want to wrap those ends around and you have a perfect tortellini. Let me show you that one more time. Wet the edge, fold it over, making sure to get all of the air out. Fold it over, wet the ends, wrap it around your finger. And you're going to do that with each of these. I have prepared 10 of these, and that's, again, about enough for one person. You want to cook these right before you serve them, and they only take 1 minute to cook. So I'm going to be setting these aside, placing a wet or a very damp towel over the top of them, and just letting them hang out until I'm ready to serve. So let's move on to the next step. Four minutes is up here. I did a quick release. And now I'm going to open up the Instant Pot. Smells incredible. And now I have to take the contents of this and put it into the blender. Be careful, this is super hot. You can see how much steam is coming off of this. Be careful of splashing as well as steam. And you just want to add all of this into a blender. You need to make sure it's a high-speed blender, because if not, you probably won't get the texture, or it might just take a lot longer for you to get the texture that you need to make this a really nice creamy sauce. We're going to blend this up. I'm going to start it out on low, let everything get blended together, and then turn it up to high speed. This is blended up, it is nice and creamy, and I'm going to taste it to make sure the seasoning is right. Look at that texture, beautifully coats the spoon. It's actually perfect. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of salt maybe, but I want it to be kind of a blank canvas. It's just supposed to be a nice creamy sauce that's under those mushroom tortellini, so I don't want it to overpower them. I want everything to be sort of delicately flavored, and this does exactly that. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of salt, let it go another second or two, and then set this aside. In the scene of the book where this meal takes place, these drunk people show up at this restaurant in Rome late at night, and upon entering, they're seated and they're handed the antipasti platter, and then shortly they're followed by the tortellini and the roast at the end. If you want to keep that time similar for your guests, then you want to do what I've already done here and kind of make all this stuff ahead of time. And what I've done now can kind of sit. The roast is going to continue to cook. The tortellini's done, just ready to be cooked. The sauce is finished. And then I'll be assembling the antipasti platter, I guess, right before people would be coming over. So I'm going to clean up a little bit, and then I'll meet you back here to assemble that. My mushrooms have been simmering for about 45 minutes, so I'm just going to be checking in with those now. As you can see, the sauce still has quite a bit of texture from those vegetables, and it's deepening in color. It's getting darker and richer. Still a few bubbles coming around here. The mushrooms are still peeking out the top, and the flavor is just concentrating nicely, but the mushrooms still retaining a lot of their integrity. So these are going to continue to go for 45 more minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to assemble my antipasti platter and then get my tortellini cooked. This is going to be a coursed out meal, so you want to have the antipasti available when the people arrive. Then the first course will be the tortellini, and then this one will come after that. So let's get the antipasti assembled. Before I assemble the antipasti platter, I want to get some parsley chopped up and finely minced, because I'm going to be using this as a garnish for pretty much most of the dishes I will be serving. So I want to have a nice supply of this ready to go. So I'm just going to dice this up. I don't know if dice is the right word. You can't really dice up leaves, but just finely chop them as much as I can so that I can easily sprinkle them on top of everything. They'll just brighten up the dishes, take the very deep, dark brown flavors of the mushrooms or the creamy flavor of the tortellini, and really just brighten them up. An antipasti platter is essentially just a kind of a cold salad, room temperature salad, that just consists of a bunch of vegetables. Some are fresh, some are pickled. What I've done here is actually, I woke up this morning and I fired up my barbecue, and I just grilled off some asparagus, which you can see here, and some zucchini. And I didn't really cook them for too long, just to a couple of minutes per side. And I did this so that I could get some nice grill marks so they would soften up a little bit. And then they've just been hanging out at room temperature since then. So I'm arranging these on this platter, just kind of simply. I guess this is my first time really arranging them, so maybe a little more haphazardly. But I just want to try to create kind of a circular thing here. So my zucchini, if I had eggplant, I probably would have grilled some of that up as well, but this is just what I had on hand. So asparagus, eggplant. I also took a yellow bell pepper and chopped this up. Well, I cut it into 3 sides and then grilled those sides. And then once they were grilled, cut it up into little strips, added a little bit of olive oil and salt, put that on top. So I'm just gonna make a little pile for those there. I got a bit of help this morning from my Whole Foods. I went to their, I guess it's their olive bar, and I picked up some marinated artichoke hearts and some roasted garlic. And I also picked up these pappardelle peppers, which in researching for a Antipasti Platter, I came across this Martha Stewart video, and she insisted on using these pappardelle peppers. So the point of this is that people can kind of pick at this while they're arriving, having wine, having cocktails. There's also gonna be bread served alongside this, and this is just something that they can pick on, nosh on, and just prepare their appetite before the other dishes are served. Last thing, I have these marinated olives. These do have pits, and I'm just gonna make a little pile of those here. Lastly, some olive oil. Just gonna give a drizzle over the grilled vegetables. And a pinch of salt. And this is my antipasti platter, ready for my guests when they arrive. The roast has about 20 minutes left, so I'm starting to do my tortellini now. I have my sauce here ready to go, and I'm only gonna be making 1 serving of this, so I'm only gonna use about maybe a half to 3/4 of a cup of sauce. You definitely don't want to over sauce this. And I'm going to be putting this into a pan that's going to be big enough to fit my entire tortellini. And I'm just going to turn this to low, warm it up. It's cooled down quite a bit since I made it originally. So that's going to start to warm up. In this pot, I have boiling salted water. Turn this down a little bit, it's a bit intense. And I'm going to be adding my tortellini. As I said, these cook for 1 minute. So if you're gonna do all of yours at one time, you wanna be able to do this as close to serving as possible. You don't wanna let this sit for too long, especially with the wonton wrappers. They really don't hold for that long. So I'm just gonna pile all my tortellini into this slotted spoon, and then I'm gonna drop them all together into the water. And I'm going to time for exactly 1 minute these cooking. All right, it has been 1 minute exactly, and I'm taking these tortellini directly out of the water and putting them into the sauce. It's okay if a little bit of the water gets in there. It's gonna help to thin out the sauce a little bit. And then you just wanna lightly toss the tortellini around in the sauce. And then we plate it up. You could do this family style if you wanted, or just plate for individuals. Make sure you get all the sauce on top. Final touch is some fresh nutmeg and a bit of our freshly grated parsley. The mushrooms have been simmering, the sauce has been reducing for 1.5 hours, so it's time to take the mushrooms out. I'm gonna taste the sauce for seasoning, add some peas to brighten it up, add a bit of freshness, add everything to a platter, and then I'm ready to serve. So the look of this is a lot like a traditional bolognese sauce or a ragu, almost a meat sauce, but as you see, all those vegetables have stayed pretty intact, even though they've cooked down quite a bit and released a lot of their flavor. As well, these other mushrooms that we put in here, these are gonna be great bursts of flavor and texture as well. So this is definitely ready to go. Let's get these mushrooms out, get this sauce ready. As you can see, these caps have definitely retained their shape, their texture, even though they've been simmering for an hour and a half. I was gonna use some other type of maybe meat alternative, something, but I feel like mushrooms were the closest sort of whole food, and I knew that they would be able to withstand the cooking as well. I wanted something that would impart as much flavor into the sauce as the sauce would be imparting into them. So I'm gonna take all of these mushrooms out here. I tasted it, it needs just a bit more salt. And then the last thing is some peas. These were frozen, I've just defrosted them. And I'm gonna add maybe about 1/4 to a 1/2 cup of those in there. And I don't want those to cook anymore. I kind of want them to have a bit of a bite still. Okay, now I'm going to slice up my mushrooms and get these on the plate. So I'm just gonna slice these into strips. Just makes it easier to serve. This dish is definitely best served family style. Also, if you wanted to just make this instead of the whole meal that I've prepared here, this would be great on top of pasta. The sauce is incredible. For today though, we're just gonna be using some nice bread to sop it up. Once I get these into strips, I'm going to just add them to this plate. And I'm keeping them somewhat intact as I move them over there, just to keep some of the integrity. You can see they're beautifully absorbed all of that flavor. Throw these caps just on top. Now we're going to add the sauce with the peas. You just want to cover this dish up with all this delicious sauce that we worked so hard for. Finishing touch, a bit of fresh parsley. It's ready to go. In the book that inspired this meal, the characters sit down at the table and are immediately given an antipasti platter, bread, and wine, followed by tortellini and cream sauce, and then their main course is a pot roast with peas and salad. I had a lot of fun putting this meal together, turning that inspiration from the book into a vegan meal that I think looks incredible here. I really love this dish here with the mushrooms and the sauce with that Roman-inspired, clove-scented pot roast. It's just such an incredible dish. And these tortellini, so easy to make when you use the wonton wrappers. Just quickly throw some things in the food processor, roll them up, and you have this amazing dish. Antipasti, perfect here. If this isn't finished or if there's still some pieces remaining, this is a great addition to go onto the salad, which would be lightly dressed with just some balsamic oil and vinegar. Sorry, balsamic vinegar and oil. I hope you give this a try as well. If you haven't figured out what the title of the book is that inspired this, I'll tell you later, or leave a guess in the comments below. There is one course that is mentioned in the book that isn't here, which is the dessert, and I will also have that for you later at another date. I just felt that this was a better composition here, which is the savory dishes, and I have an idea for the dessert that I'll show you at a later date. So I hope you like this. I hope you love this idea. If you do want to see more videos or recipes inspired by books or movies, let me know. I really had a great time doing this. So give this a try, give this video a thumbs up if you like it. If you do try any of these foods, take a picture, tag me on Instagram at MunsonMadeThis. And please subscribe to my channel. I'm close to 1,000 subscribers, and that's a huge milestone for me, and I'm really excited to hit that. So please subscribe to this channel if you see this video and you do like it. Well, I'm ready to dig in and share this with some people that I love and care for, because I put a lot of love and care into this dish. So, or into all of these dishes actually. So I will see you next week with another video. I hope you enjoy and you have a great time.